inexpensive methods of documenting architecture and archaeological finds. Before we were allowed to actually go out and work on the architecture, we were actually digging up the buildings, the temples, and the homes out of hillsides. And there's such a problem with looters out there that they dig them up every summer, a new one. When they've gone through everything, photographed it, cataloged and documented it, they put it back, they cover it with big plastic tarps, and they put the mountain back on top of it again. Every mountain in Belize is a flattened off hill that has a home on top of it, some sort of an estate, some sort of a closet. What I was working with on the left-hand side is photogrammetry on a small scale. I was taking the pottery, and what I did was I took pictures on top of that computer target on the bottom, and I took pictures from all directions, so I could make a three-dimensional model that you could spin around and look at on the internet. Right? It has not been tested to the point that I can say it is a scholarly level. You can't take measurements off of it. It gets a little foggy. Some things kind of get a little bit messed up. But it's great for the internet. It's a small file. Right? That's one form of photogrammetry. Another one is Dr. Julia is working on the building. She's doing the same thing, only at the size of a building. And she puts her files into a computer, and it puts up a point cloud. It reads out of 2 or 3 photographs, maybe 9 photographs, and it searches for all the same points and puts up a dot in AutoCAD in 3 dimension. Right? So that you can eventually, you can actually see the building in AutoCAD based on this myriad of dots, this point cloud. Now, one of the key features of this is you can design a building, take photographs of it, come back 10 years later, take pictures of a beam, and you can actually put it in the computer now and see if the beam is sagging now more than it was 10 years ago. You can check the deflection. You can find out if the building is in jeopardy of falling down, or is it doing what you expected? Is it behaving the way that you had designed it to behave? So these are some really cool stuff that I've really gotten into and I'm having fun with. And the other side is, instead of using photography, they're using a laser scanner. And this is to scan the building. And this is getting even bigger than what Dr. Julie was doing with her little, she was just doing the face of the jaguar here at the Jaguar Temple. We did the same thing as photogrammetry that I did with that little pot. But there's one of our targets. There's a target. There's targets all around. And this is a laser scanner. Have any of y'all done surveying before? Are familiar with surveyors? You see the guy standing on the road, and they're looking at that little prism way down the way, and they say, from here, I know exactly how far away that prism is. I know exactly how high up that is. The laser scanner is the same thing, only it spins in a 360-degree circle, and it sprays out signals like a sprinkler. You can get millions of dots. And then it's got a camera on top. You can see a little Nikon camera, just like you might have, just like this one would work. And it goes in from the computer and it says, at this angle, I remember which way I was looking, I'm going to color this dot the color that it is in the picture. Again, so it can stitch it together. You have a 3-dimensional point cloud. Every point has its own color. When you zoom out, it looks like a beautiful photograph. When you zoom in, it looks like stippling. And y'all have learned stippling in freehand, haven't you? Are y'all working on that, where you do things with dots? This is for large-scale scanning. And this is what I have learned, and I'm working on what I'm learning. I'm going very much into historic documentation, and these are the things that I'm learning. But I also found out a little bit more. Let's go on the next slide. Oh, well, I was going to tell you about Kingsville first. These are the different degrees that we offer. We're getting ready to offer natural gas engineering again. If you see the commercial on television where the gentleman says, who knew that natural gas engineering was going to be the #1 resource, the cleanest burning gas anywhere in the world? Frank Donnerwhite was the world's #1 person in natural gas engineering. He was the dean of the college from the 40s until the 70s, late 40s until the 70s. Natural gas engineering was his field. He's known it. So this isn't all new stuff. A lot of things, just like architecture, just like building green, knowing about the wind, knowing about the sun, these are things we're rediscovering in engineering as well as architecture. I'm getting into, as I was saying, my personal research now is the Historic American Building Survey. It's sponsored by the National Park Service and administered by the Library of Congress. And this is something that I've gotten into based on my work with Professor Warden at College Station. Professor Warden is very much into the new thing, photogrammetry. Let's get in there and do photogrammetry. We can do point clouds. We can get the computer to do all the work for us. We'll get lasers to scan everything. Well, you still have to go back and make a set of measured drawings, and it costs about $150,000 to do a project, between $50 and $150. I talked to the National Park Service, and they said, you know, there's another way. And if we move forward here, they said, you can take photographs. Photographs are with the old-fashioned large format cameras that you throw the blanket over your head because you can move the lens and the film planes independently. And the reason for this is we want to take perspective out of the equation when we're looking at a photograph. I don't have master's students in architecture. I can't do the measured drawings. I don't have the facilities. But I do have students that are willing to come out for 2 weeks and learn how to take pictures of a building one day with a large format camera. And what we do is we put a survey stick somewhere in the elevation. And if you remove, and that's what I'm just showing a close-up of that survey stick here in the second photograph. If you remove the perspective, I can take every measurement off of that elevation using the survey stick. Now, the minimum negative is 4x5. I also use an 8x10 camera. The key is, if I ever do a set of drawings, if I ever do have to turn these photographs into a set of measured drawings to actually build from, it's going to cost $150,000. Or it could cost $50,000, I should say. But the difference is the original photographs only cost $2,000 to put together, and that's having a crew out there for a week, paying for their hotels, paying for their education while they're there, paying for the camera, paying for the film. To me, it's a much better insurance policy. Clayburgh County, my home county, they can't afford to have all of their buildings documented at $50,000 a piece. They can have students go out there and do a lot of buildings for $100,000. We can do 50 buildings for $100,000. Now, if a hurricane destroys the building, well, if you absolutely have to have it and the insurance company is coming back to pay it, they're willing to pay to have the photographs turned into drawings. So this is more of an insurance policy, but it is still, it's history. I can get my students to come out for 2 weeks, they do some work, and they get published at the Library of Congress if they do the job properly, which is great when you're trying to get into grad school. Which also means I don't have to do those huge, giant projects that last 2 years. I get to do a whole lot of little bitty ones, which is fun for me. Each year we have an annual workshop, which we would love to have you guys come down this year. It's going to be the week after spring break, where we actually teach. We have the head photographer from the National Park Service, James Rosenthal, was there 2 years ago. And we actually have a couple of presentations the night before, and then all day Saturday, we actually go out and do field work. We document a building. We don't document it in front of you. We expect you to run the camera and take photographs. And when we publish, you will be listed as the photographer if your picture is included. So we would love to have you come down for that. We've got a lot of support. In 2010, no university in the United States taught large format photography for historic documentation. Kingsville was the only one that tried. Since then, Bob Warden, who thought that laser scanning was the only way to go, has included large format photography. at A&M in the graduate school, Sue Ann Pemberton at UTSA, who happens to serve on the board of the Historic American Building Survey, is integrating large format photography in her graduate studies here at UTSA. So it's growing, and we're, for being a small town in Kingsville and being an engineering program, we're having a big impact on historic architecture. Now we're getting into the commercial part. I was told that I get to do a little bit of a commercial here. For architectural engineering, what we address is, we address all the engineering disciplines that build a building. We address civil engineering because they do the structures of a building. But we talk about the civil engineering that's structures of a building. We don't care about building roads. We don't care about digging canals, ports, dikes. We're talking just the structural system of a building. We teach mechanical and electrical. We don't teach you how to build a diesel engine. We teach you how to build the HVAC system, how to decide if it's designed properly, how to run it. And then in construction management, this is just like the construction science department out at UTSA. This is the engineering approach to doing the same thing. And then also you've got, if you want to move forward and get a graduate degree in architecture or become a facility manager, these are things that you're uniquely suited for as an architectural engineer. I've heard people mention several times today, Calatrava. I believe that Calatrava is a fabulous architect because he understands the engineering. I don't think that you could have a Calatrava who didn't have both sides of it. We've got a lot of students that go to get their master's in architecture. In our program, as a matter of fact, the university, or the College of Engineering, is shooting to reach 20% of their students going to get a master's degree. The program of architectural engineering, 40% of our students get accepted to graduate school. We have 2 students that don't have a job. One of them who did not send in her application to graduate school in time, and the other one is a photographer that owns his own business and just happened to get a degree in engineering because all of his friends got a degree in engineering and he got caught up in the tide and just sort of ended up on the stage with it. But he has a going photography business, and I don't think he ever planned to be an engineer. But he got his degree. And in facilities management, we start talking about the life cycle of a building. This is something that all of you should know about. We're starting about planning. When do you need a building? What's it going to look like? What should be in the building? And then the next stage is the design work. Well, you've got the architects and the engineers working together. This is something that everybody is aware of. Anybody who watches television shows from the Brady Bunch on, that's way before your time, it was in the 60s. But those are the engineers and the architects. They're working together to design tall buildings. And smaller buildings, architects can do on their own. Smaller buildings, engineers can do on their own. But I'm talking about high rises. I'm talking about the Burj Dubai. I'm talking about the tallest buildings in the world. Right? Things that are in a big city in downtown. And then you have construction phase. Well, somebody has to be in charge. You can have an architect in charge of construction management. You can have an engineer in charge of it, or a construction manager. The problem is you have to pick somebody. Traditionally, it was either an engineer or an architect. If an architect was in charge, and the civil engineer, the structural engineer, and the mechanical engineer got in a fight over something, well, the architect knew, who cares, you know, as long as it looks pretty, who cares? You know, he was biased. But if you had a civil engineer in charge that got, and it was the project architect and the civil engineer who got in an argument, well, if the judge about the argument is a civil engineer, he's going to be biased. He's going to know, well, the architects just play with crayons. We need the building to stand out.